Let's build a herringbone paver patio. Hi, I'm Lisa with Ivy Lane Interiors, and today's outdoor project, I've partnered with Lowe's to create this patio. Now, I saw on their website these panels. They're called Brock Paver panels, and they basically replace the need to dig down too deep. So it's replacing your fill layer, and you simply dig, put your landscape fabric down, put some sand down, put this on top of the sand, and then I'm going to use a basic paver in a really cool pattern on top of it to create my patio. Let's go. This is where we come out of our patio, and it's a very narrow lot. It's only about 20 feet deep, but it's fairly wide. So it goes all the way that direction and then around the corner. So at some point we want to have like a secret garden area over here, but the only thing that was here was the ivy. We have planted everything that you see in the last 3 years. We're planning to put the patio right here between these two beds. So where it curves here, this is where the patio is going to go. So on day one, since there was rain in the forecast for the weekend, we decided we're just going to go ahead and start trying to take up the sod. Now, we were going to rent a sod cutter, but again, it wasn't available until the weekend, and this was like a Monday or a Tuesday. So we thought, we're just going to go in, and we had already cut all the beds ourselves anyway. So we had experience taking up the sod. So we just went in with our digging shovel and removed the sod. Now, this little Gorilla cart has been super helpful. We've used it for all of our landscape projects. It really just helps it be doable. So we're just going to go ahead and take the extra sod. We're going to take it around the side of our house. This is going to be another project for another day. There's a lot of low spots that need to be filled in. The previous owner actually had a dog run there, and so you can see there's some fence posts. So this is another project for another day. So we know that since we're going to be working on this area, we're just going to dump all of our extra sod over here, and then we'll deal with all of that in the next project. Since we're using the Brock Paver panel system, this is their material removal guide. You need to dig down a 1/2 inch for the leveling sand, whatever the thickness of your paver is. Then you have 7/8 for the panel itself. So in our case, we needed to dig down about 3 inches. Okay, so this is our first night. We're going to do what we get, about 13 feet?
13 feet wide so far and about 3 to 4 feet wide.
Okay.
So this way, 13 feet across so far.
Okay.
But it's night one. So
night one.
The back's good so far, but it's just day one. We'll see how it goes.
So this is my contribution, and this is my husband's. But I did haul all of the empty, I did haul the gator several times, but that's as far as I got. Here's Cooper. Hey, Coop. You be our supervisor? Okay, we made good progress for the first night. Okay, we're at the end of day 2. We've got a big chunk of it, all the sod out. We have just a very small strip along the back. So trying to take it in small little bits, and then hopefully most of it, all the sod will be gone tomorrow, and then we can start with digging out and then tamping down. So, end of day 2.
By the third day, I just had a little bit more decided to remove here on the side of the patio.
Then my husband's just going to use a little mini tiller, and we're just going to till up all of the dirt so that way it just makes it easier to spread around and then tamp down. I'm going to go ahead and measure towards the house by the edging, and I'm going to measure down that 3 inches. So I know that towards the front of the house is going to be 3 inches down, and then I know it's going to have to slope a little bit further away so that just way everything drains away from the house. So we know this area, because it's going to slope down, I'm going to have to excavate a little bit more of the dirt. So we're just going to put it on some blue tarps. We're going to take out a little bit more material, and that'll help us in the grading process. So now on day 4, I'm ready to actually establish my slope. So I did some research and found that a slope is typically a 1/4 inch drop for every foot, or 2% of the total length. So you can take your inches or your feet. So I have 12 feet times 12 is 144 inches, and you can multiply that by 2%. And so I'm a little bit under 3 inches. So I decided to just go with a 3-inch drop. And so I have a stake towards the house, and I ran a line down towards the fence. I made sure the line was level, and then I marked it. Then I measured down 3 inches, and I moved my line down. That way I will establish my slope. Now I'm going to run the same line about 3 feet away, and just work in sections, and I'm just using a 2x4, and I'm just leveling out that area. Now this was where my personality, I got really particular, and I was like, this isn't perfect. I mean, it's dirt. It's not going to be completely perfect, but I did the best that I can, and then after all that, we hand tamped it down. Since more rain was in the forecast, we decided to get rid of all the extra dirt. We're just going to haul it off. We had a low area towards the side fence, so we were able to just put some extra dirt over there. So here's my base. It is ready. And unfortunately, it ended up raining solid for about 2 weeks. What it did show me, though, is I had a slope. Everything was draining away from the house, so that was good. So by day 5, I was ready to go ahead and start with my landscape fabric. So you're going to put your landscape fabric down. Again, that's not necessarily for weed control. What you do is you're putting the leveling sand on top of it. And so that's going to help hold the sand in place so that it doesn't shift underneath your pavers. I'm putting it down, I'm overlapping it, and I'm actually putting in some landscape pins just to kind of hold it down. Now I'm ready to actually put my leveling sand down. Now I have some 1/2-inch metal conduits, and then I have my leveling sand. So I'm just going to work in the similar sections that I did before. So about 3-foot sections. I'm going to go ahead and put my leveling sand out, and then I'm going to use a 2x4, and I'm going to scree it to smooth it out. Now this was my first pass. I actually got better at it as I went, but I think because it had rained so much, it was a different type of consistency than I anticipated. I'm kind of smoothing it out with my hands first, and then I'm going to use a 2x4. I'm trying really hard not to put a lot of pressure. I'm not putting force down. I'm just pulling the 2x4 over the metal conduit to smooth it out. Like I said, this got a little bit easier as I go. So just like anything, you get better as you keep doing it. So you can see there were some low areas. I'm just going to grab some sand. I'm just going to go ahead and fill it in, go back over it. I have a trowel there that will also help kind of smooth things out. So you see there's a little area there in the middle. That's actually the flap of where the landscape fabric overlapped. And so I had some sand get underneath there and pop it up. So I will come back towards the end. You'll see before I put the paver bases down, I will fix that area. So once you have a section done, you can take the metal conduit out, move it down, but you do need to fill those areas in. So I'm just going to take a little bit of sand with my hand trowel, and I'm just going to fill in where those metal conduit was and just smooth everything out. Once you have a section done, you can go ahead and start laying your paver panel. So these are really lightweight. They do fit together, so there's like a little puzzle. I'll show you later. But you want to go ahead and put them down in a pattern that's kind of like a brick offset pattern. I'm just going to lay the first row, then I'll continue with the leveling sand, and I'll show you how I have to cut one in half in order to make it offset. So you can see more of a close-up. This is more of a brick pattern where you have one piece that is a little offset. They say that helps them stay flatter, is if you keep them offset. Now we're on to day 6. I'm ready to finish up the paver base. They can be cut, which is really nice. You'll see some areas that are curved on the one side. You can cut them very easily with a box knife, which makes this system really easy to use. You can see a close-up here of how the panels fit together. You just simply line up the pattern and it fits together nicely. And in this area I have a curve, and again it can be cut very easily with a utility knife. After a 2-week rain delay, we finally were able to get started. We have 2 days window with no rain in the forecast. So last night I put the landscape fabric down. Now the landscape fabric is not to prevent weeds, it's to hold the sand in, because then on top of that, I'm gonna put my layer of sand. I have 1/2-inch metal conduits that I'm gonna lay in the sand, and then I'm gonna scree over them to level everything out. Then the paver base goes over the sand. Now, if you're using a flat paver, you do not need additional sand. Now, if I was using like a flagstone that had a regular base, then I might have to use some more sand to level that out. But since I'm using a flat paver, they said you can go directly on top of the paver base. With all the rain, I did see that my slope was established. It was higher towards the house, and then it dipped lower towards the end of the yard. But of course, with all that rain, I was concerned about my grading. There was a few spots I ended up having to fill in a little bit, but you know, in any project, you have usually one person who's by the book and really precise, and the other person who's a little bit more easygoing. So my husband is a good balance for me when to just let things go, and it may not be perfect, but it's gonna work. So here we go. So I guess that's part of videos people don't really show is dirt is dirt. It's not going to always be 100% perfect, but gosh, it's going to be really close. So now I'm ready to establish my line, and I know I can get it straight, but I needed it to be at a perfect 90 degrees, and I wasn't sure how in the world to go about doing that. But here's what I found. Okay, I was trying to figure out how to make sure that this line was square and plumb, and I came across a video about the Pythagorean theorem where you basically draw a triangle, and as long as your sides are multiples of 3, 4, and 5, that it'll be square. This side is 9 feet, so that's a multiple of 3. This is 12 feet, 3 times 4, and then this is 3 times 5, and that's 15 feet. So I have 9, 12, and 15. So I adjusted, once I had this measurement and then I had this one, I took my 15 feet and then I was able to adjust my stake over there. And so now this is square and plumb. So when I started this project, I had my heart set on a 45-degree herringbone pattern. You're supposed to have a nice straight line there, and then you're supposed to line up your pavers just how I have them, and it should all go perfectly according to plan. But I tell you what, I tried everything, and it would just be like a millimeter off, and I just could not get it. So my sweet husband said, maybe we need to pivot and try a different pattern. But I never even researched a different pattern. So I got on the internet looking up some different patterns, and I found that there's a 90-degree herringbone pattern, and it actually looked a lot easier. So I reestablished my 90-degree angle there so I knew everything was straight. And I tell you what, this was a really great pattern. Now I'm a visual person, so I printed off what the pattern is supposed to look like. I was able to just follow that, and we literally were able to lay the entire patio in one day. You can see on the edges, those are the bricks that I'm going to have to cut in half. And so I use them there. I'm keeping them as a placeholder because I need to make sure that I have the correct width. But I saw somebody else put them up, and I thought that is genius. That way I know those are the ones that I need to cut later on. Every few rows I come through with a rubber mallet, and I'm just making sure everything is pretty tight. It really makes a big difference if you have somebody that can bring you all of the pavers as you're going. So I think we went so fast because my husband would come and bring about 10 stacks at a time, and I would just be there and I'm just putting them into place. So yes, you can do it by yourself. It would just take a lot longer. So here's a little bit of a close-up. You can see it just goes really fast, this pattern. And if I got off a little bit on my pattern, I would just look at my piece of paper and go back through and readjust it. So here it is, all laid down. This whole thing took one day, but now I have the tedious task of actually cutting it. You can see it took 3 days for me to go through and to cut each piece. Just gonna draw a line there with some chalk. To make the cuts, I'm gonna use an angle grinder with a masonry bit. So I've actually never used an angle grinder before, but they can be quite dangerous. So I had gloves on, I had a dust mask, and then I also had safety goggles on. So I just had to be really careful and cautious, and I kind of slowed down while I was doing it because there was a little bit of kickback. But you know, I know there's probably an easier way to do this. Like I know there's a concrete saw, but it's so big, and I just didn't feel comfortable renting anything like that. So I felt like this was a doable tool for me to use, and it actually worked pretty good. Now we're ready to put the edging on two sides. I've decided to use my metal landscape material as the edges for two sides, and I'm going to use this on the other two sides. I'm going to pull the landscape fabric up around the paver, and then I'll go ahead and hammer down the edge restraint, and then I'll cut off the landscape fabric. And that's just, again, going to hold in that sand a little bit better. Now I had already cut everything, but I decided I'm going to move in my green landscape metal. And so that required me to do a little bit more on the curve. Cutting the pavers with a curve was a little bit more difficult. It's not perfect, but I figure once I put the sand in, the polymeric sand, that's going to help hopefully kind of work like a grouting would, and it'll hopefully kind of make everything look a little bit more seamless. I decided to move the metal edging up closer to the brick on this side too. So I'm just going to take it out. I have to cut the paver base down or it won't fit down in there snugly. So I'm going to fit it in there, pull the landscape fabric up, hammer it down, and then trim off that landscape fabric. Woo-wee. That's as close as I can get. So here it is before I put the sand down. You can see it's not 100% perfect on that curve. That is the other reason why I decided to straighten it out there, because I didn't have to make any more cuts, because those angled cuts are harder to make. But here it is all the way around. And at this point, now we are ready to go ahead and put down our polymeric sand. And that's going to cause everything to just gel together. First step is I'm going to blow everything off. Want to make sure it's clean. And then you take your sand and you're just going to spread it around with a broom. Make sure that it gets down into all of the little cracks. And then they said you want to hand tamp it down too. That's just going to kind of vibrate that sand down into all of the little cracks. After everything is fully covered, then you're going to come back with a blower and you want to make sure that it's cleaned off really well, because if you leave any of the sand on the surface, then it'll kind of, when you activate it with the water, it'll leave some kind of a hazing on it. So you want to make sure you blow all that off. And then once you have, you're going to activate it with some water. I decided to go ahead and pretty up this area along the back side of it. We had some major rainstorms and I had a little bit of water that didn't drain as quickly as I wanted it to. So I decided to use my angle grinder and my Dremel, and I'm just going to drill a few weep holes in there so that it can drain a little more easily. So let's look back at the before. We had some ambitious plans of a nice big patio here, about 12 by 14. After all the sod removal and a lot of leveling and a lot of work, here is the finished product. What do you think? I think it turned out really good. I was so disappointed not to be able to have the 45-degree herringbone, but I really like the 90 degrees. I think it's still very classic, and I think that the color is very classic, and I think it takes a very humble paver and kind of makes it a little bit fancier by putting it in kind of an unexpected pattern. Enjoy some of these videos, and I'll come back at the end. So I'm really pleased with it. Like I said, if we end up having any problems with drainage, I can always take that green piece of edging out and I will go ahead and just put a normal edger there. So I'll keep you updated on the community tab as time goes on to see how I like it. But we also picked up these chairs at Lowe's. This is the Lola chair. They're a faux wicker. They're very comfortable. And then we did go ahead and put an umbrella up there as well. So this is a great place for us to be able to hang out as a family. So I'll link all of the products that I used in this project down in the description, but tell me what you think. Would you try this project? Are you a little hesitant about the Brock paver panel? I'll keep you updated in the community tab and let you know how it goes. But thanks so much for watching.